Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to be talking about Quixel Mixer. So far I've been showing you how to use the mega scans in a way that's easy for everyone to grasp. It doesn't matter what your level is or whether you're an artist or not. But what I want to start doing is I want to start customizing things, and that's where Quixel Mixer comes into play, where you can actually take those mega scans and do changes to them, so you don't have to use them right out of the box. You can also do some changes to them, and Quixel Mixer is the best way to go. Even if you want to do some other custom assets, Quixel Mixer is a good program to do that for texturing. Now, don't worry, I'll still try to keep it as accessible as possible. So we're going to be looking at the program step by step so everyone's able to use this. Now, the first thing you need to do is go into the Quixel Mixer website. There'll be a link in the description so you can download this. This is completely free. After Epic bought Quixel, they made all of their assets and mega scans and their programs free for everyone to use. After you download the program, all you have to do is install it. It's a straight install, just like any other program. And then just let's get right into it. Now, this is what you're going to see whenever you fire Quixel Mixer. It's going to present you with the screen so you can select your project and your mix, or you can just create a new one. So yours will probably not have anything here. So you have to create a project first. Let's give it a name. And we also need a mix. In order for this to work, we need a mix. So we'll be working on this mix and we'll just give it a name. Let's draw 01. And in here, you can actually choose your resolution for your mix. However, this doesn't matter as much because you can always change the resolution while you're in your project. So I'm just going to leave it at 4K. You choose whatever you want and you'll be able to change it later. All right, now that we are here, let's go over the interface a little bit. The first thing you're going to see here is your viewport with a flat plane. Let's talk about navigation before we get into the UI. So the way that you navigate here is you hold the button Alt on your keyboard. If you do Alt and left click, you're going to be able to rotate. If you do Alt and right click, you're going to be able to zoom in and out. If you hold Alt and middle mouse button, you'll be able to pan around. Okay, so that is how you navigate here. And by the way, wherever you place your cursor, it's where you're going to be rotating from. So think of it as your pivot point. So if I place my cursor here, you're going to see that it rotates from there. If I place it on the center, it does that rotation. And it does that. So bear that in mind whenever you're navigating. Very easy, very straightforward. Just hold your Alt button and use left for rotation, right click for zoom, and middle mouse to pan. That's all about navigation. That's pretty straightforward. Now let's get into the UI. So let's start over here. The first tab that you're usually presented with is the setup tab. So you have your working resolution. Like I said, you can always change it to something else after you are inside your project. Usually depends on your machine. So let's say you don't have a machine that's really powerful. You could always work in lower resolution, and once you're done with your mix, you can just switch it around to the higher resolution and export it that way. That's usually really helpful when you have a low machine. The other thing is you have a model setting. And here you have the type. So what we're seeing here is a plane. We can also select a 3D asset. If you click on 3D asset, this doesn't mean that you're going to be able to browse for your own asset. This just means that's going to take you to your local library for you to choose a mega scan. So if you click on 3D asset, that means you're going to be working on a mega scan. Now, the third one is custom mesh. Custom mesh is the one you want to pick if you want to work with your own assets. So you model something, you sculpted something. After you unwrap it, you bring it over here for texturing. This is what you want to pick. It will give you a window browser and you'll be able to select the location of your asset. Shader ball is this weird ball that Quixel gives you. This is mostly for testing materials. So if there's a particular material that you want to make and you just want to test it right away, this ball has everything. Has curve surfaces, it has crevices, it has normal maps, it has flat surfaces, And this will give you an example of how your material will look on many instances. So this is something good for testing, although I tend to keep to the plane for the most part. Also, in your plane, you can select the size of it. If you want to make something for, let's say, if you want to make a ground floor, and that ground floor it's like about 6 meters by 6 meters, then you can choose this size so you can get that specific tiling or that specific resolution. By the way, this is in metrics, so make sure you do your conversions. This is in meters. And let's get to the next tab, which is display. I'm going to leave layers for last because that's where we will be working. So if you go to display, you can change your background. Right now it's a gradient background. You can change that to a flat background, or you can change that to a skybox. So skybox is just showing you your HDRI. And if you want to select a different kind of HDRI, you can always go here and you can select various skyboxes. So if you click here, you can see desert road. This is just so you can test your material in different lighting situations. Now, when you're using your HDRI, you're gonna have background blur, so you can blur it out. That means that you only get like a little bit of it. And you also have your field of view. In case you wanted to change that, I actually like to leave it at default, which was 42. Whoops, that's 90. In here, we have light intensity, which is very self-explanatory. So you can see if it increases the light. Just make it 1 like it was before. We also have light rotation. So if you want to rotate your HDRI, you can also just use shift and right click if you want to rotate your HDRI. So you don't have to come here, just shift and right click to move it around. Okay. Shadow resolution, this will depend again on your machine. If you want to keep it on the down low, you can switch it around. I tend to keep it in high. Very high doesn't add that much into it. After that, you have GPU tessellation. I have it on the highest because I was working with some displacement, but you can lower it. This depends highly on what kind of machine you have, what kind of video card you have. So make sure that if your viewport is performing poorly or is very slow, make sure you reduce the GPU tessellation over here. You could also toggle the anti-aliasing. So in here you have your grid choices. I just turned this on by going over here. You can toggle your grid on and off, or by pressing the letter G. And you can change this to, let's say if I turn it off, you can see that it turns off all those little subdivisions. So in here you can change your grid color. Let's say you wanted to make your grid some other color as well. I like to keep it like that. And I usually don't have the grid on, to be honest. I don't need to have the grid on, but let's keep going. So I'm gonna switch from skybox to gradient, which was what I had before. And let's go to the other tab. In the performance tab, we have very important settings. So depending on what kind of computer you're running this on, you're gonna have resolution. You can do half a resolution if you don't have that much GPU. The target frame rates will also help with the performance. The quality of blur. Blur is one of the effects from Quixel Mixer that takes a lot of resources. So changing the quality will help out with the performance as well. Down samples, you're gonna see that I have it turned off because I don't want anything to be down sample. This is mostly to help with performance. So if you're suffering from any performance problems, make sure you check these out. We have the resolution here, and I think this is very generous. Usually not every program has this deep of customization for the viewport, so you can have it in a low-end computer. So this is quite good if you see that you're starting to have some problems. Now next to it is the export tab. So make sure you select the folder where you want your exports to go. They're usually going to come out with the mix name, which is this one right here. Have it to create subfolders. So it's going to go over here and it's going to create extra folders. Now for the export format, you're going to see that there is JPEG, there's TGA. TGA is an uncompressed file, just like TIFF and EXR. EXR also has a lot of information for HDR. If you're dealing with HDR, that's a little bit more complicated. But if you want to, if someone tells you, hey, I need an uncompressed format, TGA or EXR will do you any good. I usually work with PNGs, because it's a good like in between. From JPEG, it's a smaller file, but it's really compressed. And TGA, it's a non-compressed file, so it's really large. So for me, PNG is something in between, although you don't have the properties of using HDR like you do with EXR. But that is depending on what kind of project you have. And again, you can change your resolution over here. Here you can select the maps that you are going to export out depending on what kind of workflow you're using, and then you can just export the maps. All right, that's it for this side. And again, I said that the layers will come back to that later. Over here, let's look at over here. We have first the viewport tab, then we have the local library. So this is everything that you've downloaded. Actually, I've downloaded only surface assets to play here. So if I go to surfaces, you're gonna see that I have all the things that I've downloaded so far. I don't have any 3D assets here right now, but you can also go online and here you can browse all the Megascan assets if you want. Okay. Going back to our viewport, and over here we have the drop down menu where we can select what we're gonna see. PVR metalness is going to show you everything put together. You can also select albedo. You can select metalness, roughness. One of the things that I played a lot is the active mask. So if I'm working with a mask, I'll usually go into my active mask. But just so you know that whenever I tell you to change to one of the other modes, they are on here on this drop down menu. Right here, we have a preview mesh. So this is kind of weird because we are supposed to already have selected what we want to view. Let me switch that to PVR. But here we can change it to something else. If you've been to ArtStation or if you see how people present their materials, they usually don't do it only on a plane. They sometimes use another type of primitive like a cube. So you can use a cube like this, or you can use a rounded cube. If you want to, you can also do a sphere, you can do a cylinder. So you can select various things to showcase your material, and actually you can test your material and see how much is going to deform with different types of primitives. And again, I usually keep to a plane unless I'm doing something very specific. The next button, this should always be activated, but in case it's not, then make sure you activate it. This is the preview displacement. So if you're working with a displacement map, this is what's going to show it. So if I don't do any displacement, I don't need this, but most of the time when we're working with Megascans, we're going to be using displacement, so make sure this is activated. The other thing that we have here is the tiling. So let's say I created a mix here and I wanted to see how it looks when it tiles. I'll just click here, and as you can see, that square just got bigger. That means that it expanded so we can see the tiling. The next one is the grid that I already showed you how it is. And over here we have the orthographic views, and we also have the perspective views. This is usually very useful when you're doing with a custom mesh, not so much when you're doing with a plane like this. All right, let me go through this one real quick because I know you're all excited to see what the layers tab is all about, but I'm gonna go into file. And as you can see, it has your regular Windows stuff like new, open, save, quick export. You have your preferences here. If I go to preferences, you're gonna see that you can select where everything is going to go. You have your user interface. In case you have a high DPI monitor, those are mostly for design. You have your libraries, so you can access different types of libraries, asset manager, help, and experimental, which always includes things that I don't touch because they're experimental and they tend to crash all the time. All right, let's get to work here. So layers, this is the main tab that we're going to be working all the time and the tab that you should be looking out for. Over here, we have the albedo, we have the metalness, and all the maps that we're going to be using. So let me show you something. Let's build something so you can see what you can do here. So we have a base layer. You always need one layer to be working here, but let's start with a solid. So as you can see over here, we have a surface layer. If you click this button, it's actually going to take you to a surface. And if you actually, you know what, let's just work with the surface. All right, now we have a surface here, but we are not seeing our surface. And why is that? The reason why we're not seeing our surface is because there is another layer right here, and the threshold is all the way down to 0. So that means that this layer and this layer are exactly at the same height. So if I turn this off, there you go. Okay, so we always want to have one layer available. Let's say if I had another layer here, if I turn this one on, that's what the displacement, that's why it's so important to have this on, because usually you're going to see this when we're doing remixes. That's what they call when you mix two surfaces together, apparently. You are going to be using the threshold right here, and this is the amount of height that you want one layer over the other. So if I'm in this layer, I can increase my threshold. As you can see, that pops up really nice, and it's like it's popping out of concrete, which again, I think it's really cool. But anyways, let's leave that to 0 before we'll play with this in a little bit. So we have surfaces, we have decals, which, if you know, I've already talked about decals. We can import them in and play with them. We have a solid layer, which is a solid layer would be if you were in Photoshop and you just filled something with one color. That's what a solid layer will be. So if you haven't touched Photoshop, imagine that you have a layer and you just fill it out with one color and there's nothing else there. That's what a solid means. You have a liquid layer. So the best way to show you liquid layer will be this one right here. So let me add a liquid layer. And as you can see, everything turned to like a muddy brown. That's what they mean by liquid. So if I lower the threshold, you can see that it actually looks as if this floor is a little bit flooded by water. So this is one of the great things about Quixel. It has this liquid that's already there, so you don't have to be creating your own liquid layer. You just have it ready right here for you to use. There's another thing called noise. You can add a noise layer, which is usually a purling noise. And over here, it's not doing much because it doesn't have much amplitude. But if I increase this, you're gonna see that it's just, you know, some distortion to add to your layer. I think this is very weird. So just gonna get rid of that. And then we have a paint layer. So if I click on my paint layer, I can paint stuff on it. You can see that I can select various types of brushes. And I'm also erasing kind of like the displacement that's already there. So you can select the color. If you go here, you can uncheck the displacement if you don't want to paint displacement, if you just want to do colors. And I don't think this is as robust as Substance Painter, but we are going to be painting some stuff with this. So just so you know, whenever you want to paint, you make a paint layer. If you don't want to paint, you just make a solid layer. All right, down here, we're going to have mask stack. We're also going to have ID. So sometimes where you're baking your materials, unfortunately, this program doesn't have a baker. So if you're going to be baking other maps, and for those of you who are new to 3D, baking maps means that when you have a lot of detail, you usually don't want as much geometry into your game or your asset. So what you do is you bake that down into a texture. That's what it is, and you cannot do this yet here. So material ID is one of those things where you can bake different kinds of colors into a texture, and you'll be able to select by material ID. This is mostly for custom meshes. Now the next one is paint a mask on this layer. That means that we're going to be adding a mask, and we are able to paint away on that mask and reveal what's underneath. So we can select a different kind of brush here, and we can see what's going on underneath. Right now it's also painting with displacement. So there you go. And you can just right click here and delete the mask. All right, and then we have group, which means that we'll just add everything into a folder. So if I wanted to add this to the group, I'll just drag it over here. And a group can have a mask. So if you're doing something more complex, you can always do some grouping of your layers and just do a mask if you want to further customize that. And finally, we have the trash can, which means just delete everything. All right, that was an overview of the very basics of Quixel Mixer. So let's do a mix real quick so you don't go out of this video without doing anything. So let's just go, and I'm gonna grab from my library, I'm gonna grab this grass. I'm actually going to get rid of this layer, and let's do something fun and really easy. So you have this layer, this nice looking rock, which can be a ground. Let's say the ground, you know, hasn't been taken care of. There's been a lot of rain. So let's add some plants to it. A little bit of grass here. And the way that we're going to be doing this is we're going to play with the threshold. So I'm just going to reduce the threshold right here. So you're going to see those rocks going through, and it's actually going straight into the crevices. This is what I love this thing so much. When you can play with threshold, and you can also play with the radius. The radius is how much is of the other surface it's getting. So I'm going to keep a radius about here. Preserve details is just going to talk about the details that are underneath. They usually don't matter as much unless you have something very specific. Wrap to underlying means that the surface above is going to try to wrap as much. Right now we don't need that. And blur underlying means that it's going to make everything a little bit more diffuse. Now these are a little bit more specific. We're going to talk about them later. For now, if you want to download these two surfaces, so we have stone wall 2x2 and we have clover patches on grass. You can search for those and download them and play with them. And you can play with threshold right here, so you can have a whole new mix. All right, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking around. For those of you who are new, I do 3D tutorials. So far, I've been doing stuff on Quixel Mixer. Please leave a like. Please leave a comment on what kind of tutorial you'd like to see. And I'll see you in the next video.